why am I thinking about Rome? Because I just wrote a book. It should be available shortly. And I've been thinking a lot about this lady. This lady's name is Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa Luxemburg. Now, Rosa Luxemburg, she was born in Poland from a Jewish family, but a secular Jewish family. Didn't practice the Jewish religion, a secular Jewish family. And at a young age, she got very, very interested in economics. She was exceptionally smart. They didn't really encourage girls to get educated back then as much. They didn't encourage girls to study mathematics and economics, but she was exceptionally intelligent at a young age. And at a young age, she studied at, university, and she got involved in leftist politics. She became a Marxist, and she wrote her college thesis on the economy of Poland. And she did something that was very brave at the time, which is that at the time, she was a young Marxist who was studying economics at the university there in Poland. And all the leftists and all the radicals in Poland were calling for Poland to be independent from Russia. Right? That was the main thing that young Polish activists wanted. They hated Russia. They hated the Russian Empire. They were for independence. Rosa Luxemburg wrote her academic thesis saying that actually there was not a strong case for Polish independence. And she argued, based on years of meticulous research, that the economy of Russia and the economy of Poland were integrated with each other, and that it would not be in Poland's economic interest to have independence from Russia. And she argued instead that Russia and Poland should have a revolution together and move toward socialism together, and that breaking Poland away from Russia would not be economically prosperous. And she broke with what was trendy among radicals, hating Russia, hating those Russians. All right, that was what was trendy among young Polish activists. And she did her homework and she did the research, and she said, no, actually, we should want a revolution in Russia and in Poland. And that, no, I'm not going to go along. I know it's trendy. I know we all, that's a big trendy thing, this nationalist, Polish nationalism. She rejected Polish nationalism. And what's interesting is Lenin disagreed with her. A lot of people disagreed with her. But now it looks like Russian President Vladimir Putin says that she was correct, right? That actually the seeds of nationalism planted by the Bolsheviks led to the nations of what was formerly the Russian Empire being separate from each other. And as a result of that, the fall of the Soviet Union happened, and that part of the world, the landmass of Eurasia, right? You talk about Russia, Georgia, Moldova, Lithuania, Latvia, right? Ukraine. They're better when they're together. And Rosa Luxemburg, despite being Polish herself, and despite being of Jewish descent, it wasn't too good for Jewish folks to live in the Russian Empire back then. She did the math and she said, no, I'm not going to go along with what's trendy, right? All the young activists, all the young Marxists were protesting for Polish independence. We want Poland to break away from Russia. And she said, no, that will economically not benefit us. I'm actually arguing that Poland and Russia are better together and we should fight together. That was her position. A brilliant, brilliant young woman and a brave woman, right? Not only did she have the courage to go against Russia, the Russian Empire, and believe in Marxism, but she had the courage to go against the Marxist movement and oppose Polish independence. Brilliant, brilliant woman. Brilliant, brilliant woman. Rosa Luxemburg, a brilliant academic economist of the Marxist variety. Rosa Luxemburg developed a theory of imperialism, right? At the time, capitalism was changing how it operated, right? It was no longer the rule of corporations and no longer the rule of the individual factory owner and the individual worker. It was the rule of big corporations and monopolies. And Lenin wrote his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. She wrote her book, Accumulation of Capital. And she developed her own theory of imperialism. And she argued that Lenin underestimated it. And she said that Lenin said imperialism, the imperialist stage of capitalism, started in 1890. She said it had been around much longer. And that she argued that what we now call imperialism began in the period of colonialism. And she had a slightly different understanding of the imperialist stage of capitalism. I don't know who is right. At this point, I draw from Henry Charles Carey and his theory of the English system versus the American system. I draw from Lenin and his theory of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. I draw from Dugin and the geopolitical school that talks about civilizations of the land and empires of the sea. And I want to learn more about her theory of the accumulation of capital and how she argued that colonialism and what we now call imperialism was rooted in the foundations of capitalism and colonialism. I find that to be fascinating. So she developed her own theory of imperialism. She was just an exceptionally brilliant person, an exceptionally brilliant writer, and one of the most respected minds of the European Marxist movement. And the biggest Marxist party in the world at that time, biggest political party in the world, was the German Social Democrat Party. So Rosa Luxemburg moved to Germany and they hired her, and she was the head of education for the German Social Democratic Party. And she taught Marxist economics to people all across Germany. And all kinds of crazy things happened. First of all, she developed a theory of the mass strike. She argued that a strike that's led by a labor union is in and of itself not radical enough. But she noticed that there were what they called mass strikes that were taking place, where a strike that's led by a labor union, suddenly the whole population gets involved. And that she wrote a whole book about this mass strike phenomenon. When, regular strikes, or you have a labor union in a factory that goes on strike against the employer. But she talked about how in places where you have almost a big uprising, what starts out as one labor union going against one employer turns into what she calls the mass strike phenomenon, where a whole city rebels, right? And the mass strike phenomenon, she talked about that. And she was very, very opposed to German imperialism. And as World War I was getting together, as Germany was becoming more and more militarized, she emphasized that the Social Democratic Party of Germany should focus on opposing war and militarism. And that was not a popular position. The guy who was the head of the German Social Democratic Party, was the bigwig, the head of Marxism at the time, the head of the most prominent international Marxist, was a guy named Karl Kautsky. And Karl Kautsky developed this theory of ultra-imperialism. He said there would never be any more imperialist rivalries because the imperialist countries would form a cartel like the big banks, and there wouldn't be any rivalries between them, and they would just kind of respect each other and colonize the third world. It was his theory of ultra-imperialism. Rosa Luxemburg said the opposite. She said all this military spending is going to lead to a giant war. And she said World War I is going to happen and we need to agitate against war. And Karl Kautsky said, no, there's not going to be any war. Yeah, there's a lot of military spending and all that, but that's just theater. They're going to form a cartel. They're all getting along with each other. The Americans, the British, and the French, and the Germans, they're not going to fight each other. Don't worry about it. She was raising the alarm based on her understanding of the economics of capitalism, of the accumulation of capital, of imperialism, and how it operated in her time. She understood that there was a big war coming, and she raised the alarm, warning about war. And one thing that she did is she tried to encourage people not to go into the German army, not to fight in the German army. And so she went around talking about the abuse that soldiers were subjected to, right? Soldiers were not given proper food. Soldiers were flogged and tortured. She went around promoting that. And so they arrested her. This is long before World War I ever happened. They arrested her for defaming the army. And so she had a free speech trial. And at her free speech trial, she got hundreds of former soldiers to come and testify about the abuse that went on in the German military and how miserable it was to be a soldier in the German military. Amazing. And they thought that they would silence her by prosecuting her for defaming the army. But instead, what they did was they enabled her to have an even bigger platform. Her defense was, what I'm saying is true. And hundreds of people came and testified about the abuse they endured in the German military, and she was acquitted. Amazing. Rosa Luxemburg, just this amazing, dynamic woman. Just an amazing, amazing person. And then World War I broke out. And when World War I broke out, the Social Democratic Party betrayed its pledge. And they supported the war. They'd pledged they would never support a capitalist war. Never, never, never. And they sold out. And she was furious. And she refused to support World War I. And so they threw her in prison. And she was locked in a women's prison in Germany. And while she was in prison, she wrote the Junius pamphlet, a beautiful anti-war manifesto. That's where this quote comes from. At the beginning, she warned. She said that the war was rooted in the needs of the capitalist system, the crisis of overproduction, and the tendency of the falling rate of profit. And she said that wars like this were going to become more and more and more frequent, and as the needs of and it would lead to Europe going the way of the Roman Empire. And she wrote her pamphlet. She didn't sign it because she didn't want to go to prison, right? It was illegal to publish anti-war literature. So her pamphlet, the Junius pamphlet, The Crisis of Social Democracy, calling out and exposing the fraudulent Social Democratic Party for going along with the war, condemning Kautsky and Schneidemann and Ebhardt and the leaders of the German Social Democratic Party for claiming to be anti-war and claiming to be socialist and then supporting an imperialist war, and exposing the economic foundations of World War I, what World War I was really about. She understood economics. She was an economist. And this pamphlet, the Junius pamphlet, made a huge impact. And after she got out of prison, she went to Switzerland. Switzerland was a neutral country, right? And that's where all the socialist leaders that opposed the war and had to flee went. Lenin moved to Switzerland, and the Italian socialists moved to Switzerland, and all the people that opposed the big anti-war people to avoid going to prison in Europe while Europe was experiencing one of the most horrendous wars in history, World War I, they all went to Switzerland, which was the neutral country. And in Switzerland, at a place called Zimmerwald, they gathered and they formed an anti-war bloc, the Zimmerwald movement. I'll show you a picture of the Zimmerwald meeting. They gathered at this little hotel in Switzerland called Zimmerwald. Right, this is a picture of them. There's Lenin, there's Rosa Luxemburg. They gathered at Zimmerwald. They signed the Zimmerwald Manifesto. It's not very many of them. Is there even 20 people in that picture? Small group of people, but there's the Russians and the British and the Italians. There they are at Zimmerwald. This is the hotel they met at, the little tiny hotel, right? Here, I'll put it on here. This is the hotel, the little tiny hotel they met at. Whatever comes up on the screen. Right? This is the hotel in the mountains. They gathered at this hotel and they wrote the Zimmerwald Manifesto opposing World War I. Rosa Luxemburg went back to Germany, continued doing anti-war activism, and they threw her in prison again. And Lenin was living there in Switzerland, and one day he got a knock on his door. And the knock on his door was from Alexander Parvus. Alexander Parvus was Lenin's old friend who had stabbed him in the back, a Russian-born Marxist socialist who had moved to Germany and gotten elected to the parliament and supported World War I. Lenin hated Parvus. Parvus had betrayed. Parvus had sold out and supported World War I. And Lenin hated Parvus and had written furious things about Parvus. But Parvus knocked on Lenin's door as a member of the German parliament, but also as a German intelligence officer, a member of the secret police. This is Parvus, right? We'll put Parvus on the screen here. As a member of the German secret police, Alexander Parvus said, "Look, Lenin, I know you're mad at me. I know you hate my guts. I know we don't agree with each other. I support Germany in the war and you're anti-war and you think I'm a big sellout and a traitor. But I can help you get back to Russia. You know, I wouldn't appreciate any anti-war activism in Germany, but if you took some of your anti-war activism back to Russia, that might help us in the war. And we can offer you a very, very large sum of money. and we can offer you a sealed train car so no one will notice that you're coming. And you can go back to Russia with a big wad of cash. And why, you can do a whole bunch of anti-war activism in Russia, lead some strikes. Maybe you can even break away some of the nationalities. Maybe you can get the Ukrainians to be independent. Maybe you can get the Moldovans to be independent. Maybe you can get the Georgians to be independent. You can start like nationalist movements to break apart Russia. How does that sound, Lenin? You think you can do that? Lenin said, sure, I'll take you up on it. Yeah, fine. That's what you want. And Lenin shook hands with his old enemy, Alexander Parvis, and he got on a train. And he went to St. Petersburg. And the rest is history, folks, because out of what Lenin did, you got the Soviet Union. Right? And it kind of was the opposite of what Alexander Parvis had wanted. Alexander Parvis had hoped Lenin would break apart Russia with nationalist movements. And what actually happened was that great Russia emerged as the Soviet Union under Stalin. But that's a whole nother thing. So what happened to Rosa Luxemburg? Well, Rosa Luxemburg went back to Germany and did more anti-war activism, and they threw her in prison. And she was in prison. And then World War I ended. And World War I ended, and the Germans epically lost. They lost. They signed an armistice on the land, and then the Kaiser ordered the Navy to go die, to do one last attack and just have the Navy all just die. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. And on the Navy ships, the rank and file soldiers overthrew their officers, and the sailors seized control of the ships. And pretty soon, the soldiers in the German army were rising up and overthrowing their officers. And there was a state of revolution happening all throughout Germany in 1918. November of 1918 is when World War I ended. And there was a revolutionary crisis. The Kaiser stepped down. People were rebelling. The army was in a state of revolt. And as that was happening, they let Rosa Luxemburg out of the jail. And a revolt started spreading through Germany. And as she got out of the jail, Rosa Luxemburg formed a new Marxist organization called the Spartacist Bund, or the Spartacist League, after Spartacus, the slave of Rome, this Roman slave rebel. And she formed the Spartacist Bund. And they had a founding meeting, and she announced, we're forming a new revolutionary organization, and that we're going to create a socialist Germany for the working class. And people in Germany were rallying around her and supporting her, and the country was in a state of upheaval. So what happened? Well, the social democratic leaders, the same ones who had sold out and supported World War I, they went to the military, to the people in the military that were still loyal, the Freikorps, they were called, these right-wing militias, right, that were formed, that were against the communists and didn't agree with the surrender, right, wanted to keep fighting in World War I. And the Social Democrats sent the Freikorps to crush the Spartacus revolt. And they moved into the area where they were, and she was taken away in the middle of the night, disappeared, interrogated, and then shot in the head. And they weighted her body with stones, and they threw it in the river. And that was the death of Rosa Luxemburg. And Rosa Luxemburg, when the Communist International was formed, the Comintern was formed, the very opening of the Comintern, Vladimir Lenin opened the Comintern with a moment of silence in honor of Rosa Luxemburg, the finest adherent of the Third International and its policies. All right, Rosa Luxemburg is a fascinating historical figure. And she understood economics on a very high level, and that she's unfairly represented. The reason that there's a lot of people who like her is they like her because she criticized the Bolsheviks. She criticized Lenin. But if you read her criticism of Lenin, she's basically saying that Lenin's theory of the party of new type wouldn't work. Wouldn't work in Germany. right? And that she had written about the mass strike. You need kind of spontaneity to be, but she was in a different country. Lenin's theory of the party of new type was a very Russian formulation. She, on the other hand, was organizing in Germany, a country that was far more industrialized, that had different traditions and all of that. And she's not saying Lenin's a bad guy, and she's not saying Lenin's an evil dictator. She's just saying that the amount of control that the Bolsheviks wanted to exercise over their revolutionary organization and the centralization that Lenin's theory of the party of new type put forward, that would suppress creative revolutionary energy. And that perhaps she was right. I don't know, right? She had criticism of the Bolshevik organizational formulations. And on the national question, she disagreed with the thesis of supporting oppressed nations, right? She argued that trying to promote nationalism, you should just have workers' solidarity. She was against nationalism. And that was based on her experience in Poland, where she opposed the Polish nationalist movement. And she saw that it was not in Poland's economic interest to break away from Russia, and that Poland and Russia should have had socialism together, is what she argued in her pamphlet. And that was based on her experience. So it's a complex issue. It's a complex issue. Rosa Luxemburg gets highlighted by a lot of people who like her because she died. She never established a socialist government. After she died, some other communists in Germany established the Bavarian Soviet Republic, which, lasted about a year, and it was like a civil war. It was a disaster, Red Bavaria or whatever, but she was not part of that. She was dead already. She died, and she had written against Lenin, right? She'd criticized the vanguard party theory of Lenin. So a lot of people like her because she was a woman, right? So that means that she's woke and that, she's not an evil, sexist white male. She's a woman because she died before she took power, and she disagreed with Lenin and called, Lenin's party a new type authoritarian. So there's a lot of people that romanticize Rosa Luxemburg for that reason, but they don't actually read her work, right? They're attracted to the idea of her because they want to be democratic socialists and not like the Soviet Union, because they like the idea of a woman, right? Who's not a white man. She's a woman. They like the idea, but they don't really engage with her. She was a genius economist, a real believer in human creative power. And she was obsessed with ancient Rome, right? Roman history, the history of ancient Rome. She named her pamphlet, the one she put out. She couldn't put her name, so she signed it Junius, after the Roman general. She called her group the Spartacist Bund, or the Spartacist League. This quote about desolation, depopulation, a great cemetery. She was obsessed with ancient Rome, right? That's Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa Luxemburg is a really important figure. And because of the book I just wrote, and then because of another project that I'm working on, shout out to David Fox, it's right behind that, I've had to dig into a lot of Rosa Luxemburg's work. And as I dig into it, I'm impressed. I'm impressed, and I'm annoyed by how she's been misrepresented. The woke feminist LGBT left wants to glorify her. They don't understand what she was about. And actually, one person who really liked her was Lyndon LaRouche, Lynn Marcus and the National Caucus of Labor Committees. Back when the LaRouche movement were still calling themselves Marxists, they promoted Rosa Luxemburg's writings quite a bit. And, because she had some very, very brilliant understanding. And again, it's about economics, right? Economics gets lost. The woke left is not interested in economics. They are interested in the aesthetic of rebellion. They are interested in the emotion of the red flag, libidinal and Oedipal impulses. They're not interested in economics. Rosa Luxemburg understood economics. It was her understanding of economics that told her that World War I was coming, and that opposing World War I should be the focus, opposing militarization should be the focus. It was our understanding of economics that had her, understand that, Polish independence was not going to lead to anything good for Poland, right? She had an understanding of economics, and that's why Rosa Luxemburg was important. And that who killed Rosa Luxemburg? The Marxists. The socialists. She wasn't killed by capitalists. She was killed by Marxists. The same group of people that run the synthetic left of Germany, the DSA of Germany, killed Rosa Luxemburg. right? Karl Kautsky, who said, oh, we don't have to worry about World War I. I've got this theory of ultra-imperialism. Schneiderman, Ebert, Nosk. The DSA of Germany killed Rosa Luxemburg. Let me repeat that. The DSA of Germany killed Rosa Luxemburg, not Hitler. Hitler wasn't around for another 20 years. Not Hitler, not the conservatives, not the church, the DSA, the Democratic Socialists, the Social Democrats that always find a way to be on the side of the imperialists. They talk a nice game about, oh, we want this and we want that. And I am Bernie Sanders. I want jobs for everyone, but we must support Israel. We've got to support Israel, and we've got to have a war with Vladimir Putin because he's a dictator. Look, I'm Bernie Sanders, and I always find a way to be on the side of the imperialists. Sure, I can give a good speech about jobs and healthcare, but I always find a way to be on the side of the imperialists. I'm just like Karl Kautsky. I'm just like Eberhard and Schneiderman. I am a social democrat, social imperialist, lying piece of shit. That's what I am, folks. That's why I'm rallying working people to want a war with Russia. That's why I didn't fight when they stole the election from me in 2016 and 2020. I am Bernie Sanders, and I am a social democratic, social imperialist. That's what I am. That's what I am. And that's the people who killed Rosa Luxemburg, the Social Democrats. The Social Democrats killed Rosa Luxemburg because she wasn't one of them. She wasn't part of their little club that manages socialism for German imperialism. She was somebody who actually believed in these principles and actually understood the tendency of the falling rate of profit and capital accumulation and all this stuff. Right? There's always a bourgeois labor party. There's always a group of fake socialists. That's the point that Lenin makes in his important pamphlet, Imperialism and the Split in Socialism. Capitalism in its imperialistic monopolist state doesn't work without socialists. If we actually implemented the free market libertarian policies that libertarians want, capitalism would fall apart. All right? You need fake socialists, social democrats to run imperialism. And we're not interested in joining their little club and being in the back of the room and shouting, ooh, ooh, pick me, pick me. We're not interested in that. We want to go lower and deeper to the real masses. That's what we want to do. All right? The struggle to defeat imperialism won't be a struggle in spite of them. It will be a struggle against them. Do not doubt it. We're not on the same team. We're not part of the same movement. We want something fundamentally different than they want. They want imperialism to work more effectively. We want a government of action that fights for working families. We want this economic system to be dismantled. We want a new economic order where human labor power and human creativity is recognized as the source of all wealth, and the government invests in enabling economic growth and expansion. They want to manage the degrowth of capitalism. That's what they want to do. They want to manage it. We want growth under an anti-monopoly government, a government of action that fights for working families. And these are fundamentally different. And it might sound the same, right? We want jobs for everybody. They want jobs for everybody. We want healthcare. They want healthcare. Yeah, they want to offer these things as a way to get you to accept their degrowth and their wars and make imperialism function. We want these things as part of building a mass movement to completely break apart and restructure the American economy to be part of the rising new world. These are fundamentally incompatible. And they know we're the enemy, right? The People's Forum in New York City. It's run by the party of sellout liberals, the PSL. It's run by the people like that. And the day after, when it first opened, CPI hadn't even been formed yet. We were Students and Youth for a New America. And we would go there and leave our literature. And the security guard would always say, you can't do that. And would give us a phone number. Well, if you want to leave literature, you have to call this phone number. And we call the phone number and there would never be any answer. It'd be like an answering machine that never got back to us. They know we're the enemy. They know we're the enemy. All right. That's why when I went to Minneapolis, there were 15 nut jobs protesting outside of the CPI workshop. We had a small workshop put together by Penny in Minneapolis, and there were 15 of these woke creeps outside screaming about us being a cult, right? There's a reason, right, that the Communist Party published a smear piece on their website against the Center for Political Innovation. They don't do that. They just ignore all the other communist groups. But we were so much of a threat, so much the enemy, they had to publish a smear piece on their website. I'm still proud of this smear piece. They published it. They quoted this book, the City Builders book, in it, right? They quoted this book, and I will show you, right? It's amazing, right? Nobody has ever gotten this level of, you are important from the Communist Party. But the Communist Party was so scared of Caleb Maupin, right? They even have a Caleb Maupin section on their website. I kid you not, right? They have a Caleb Maupin section. Like you go to CPUSA, they even have a special like Caleb Maupin section that leads to this article. Now, I am not making this up, right? This is how scared they are of us, right? Socialism in America and the left is run by Satan. This is the Caleb Maupin section on the Communist Party website, why you're supposed to hate me. That's how important I am, right? Socialism in America is run by Satan. It is run by Satan. It is run by a group of people that want degrowth, that think that overpopulation is a big problem and want depopulation. It's run by a group of people who think Russia is a bigger threat and want to destroy Russia. It's run by a group of people that pander to the Democratic Party. It's run by a group of people that want gun control to disarm the working class. It's run by a group of people that supported the COVID lockdowns that destroyed people's lives. It's run by a group of people that think if you question transgenderism and say, geez, I don't know about women's sports, that you deserve to be murdered and killed. It's run by some pretty evil people, right? And there's no way to put it any other way. It's run by satanic forces. And those forces have seen that the real forces of truth in this world, like me, right? Look at the video of me with Russian President Putin. He's a real anti-imperialist leading a real country, Russia, against the globalist imperialist system. Putin likes me. They hate Putin. Look at the video of me with Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, right? Again, the leader of an anti-imperialist country. Look at what I've done as I've traveled around the world. Look at us in the streets talking about Ibrahim Traore. We're on the side of righteousness. We are on the side of the pro-growth, emerging anti-monopoly coalition around the world. These people are on the side of woke imperialism. They are on the side of bombs that have rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter painted on them. They're evil people. And these are the people that killed Rosa Luxemburg, right? And they hate us because we believe what they're supposed to believe, right? What these people purport to believe is what we actually believe. And we have an economic program to rally America's working families to fight for this. And that is why they hate us, right? And that's the first thing you learn, right? If you join any communist group in America, the first thing they tell you, I'm not exaggerating, is there's this guy out there named Caleb. He's bad. And they can't ever tell you why I'm bad. I'm bad. The reason changes every week. I'm bad because I believe in patriotism. Well, that's funny, right? That's always been a part of Marxism. I'm bad because I met Alexander Dugin, who's supposedly a Marxist or supposedly a fascist. He's not a fascist. I'm bad because I'm a rapist. I've never raped anybody, and that's obvious. I'm bad because I run a cult. I mean, CPI is a pretty open group. We let people do what they want to do. We're pretty freewheeling. I'm bad because there's just some reason Caleb's bad. Caleb's bad. I'm bad because I'm not a fraud like they are. That's why I'm bad. And that's why they're terrified of me. And I'm exposing their scam, right? They're thieves caught in the act, right? The worst thing that the imposter can ever handle is when the real person walks in. Well, I'm telling you, how many people have done what I've done and been where I am? I've videotaped police brutality acts and gotten young African-American women acquitted in court, right? I have risked my life in humanitarian missions, delivering medical aid to Yemen. I have published more books than these people can ever imagine. I have put on seminars and organized events. I've confronted Saw Ing-wen, the so-called president of Taiwan, on the streets of New York City. You name what I have done, right? I've spoken to thousands of trade unionists at the Trade Union Congress of Brazil. I am the real deal, folks. right? And as much as you might blow up some imposter, some rich kid from California, you might blow him up, some rich kid who doesn't even know what imperialism is and can't explain basic, Marxist economic concepts. As much as you try to cover this up with social media, as much as you defame me and lie about me, the truth is the truth. I am the real deal. I am the real deal. And through working with me, you can be empowered. Look at Noah, right? Look at Noah. He's a young member of our group, right? And we have enabled him to give talks. We have enabled him to go to Russia and meet the Russian president. We have enabled him to start his own YouTube channel. He's making great videos. Look at Penny, right? Penny is a woman in Minneapolis. She gave a great speech about how she was looking for answers. And now she's out there, building this organization and traveling across the country, soon to be traveling around the world. I mean, you look at how we empower people. We believe in human creative power, right? And we do it, and we're the real deal. Go to the CPI website and look at everything we've done, observing elections in Nicaragua, observing elections in Russia. We're the real deal, right? We're the real deal. And we have enough common sense to realize that communism is the private property of some shitty entities, and that what Americans think communism is not attractive, and that we have taken the innovationist turn to build a new movement. That's what we're doing. We're building a new movement. We're organizing. We're going lower and deeper to the real masses. We're not begging for a place in leftism. We're not begging for a place in communism. Look, there was a Palestine conference in October, and we went to it, and we brought thousands of copies of our book about the Houthis. We paid to get in. We went in, and we left the books everywhere, and the PSL thugs escorted us out. Really, I mean, we're pro-Houthi. We're on their side. We support the Palestinians. But PSL is so scared of us, they removed us. But then this other communist party, this other influencer brand, they showed up. And did they pass out any books? No. Did they do anything? No. They just took selfies of themselves. And they tried to get close to Hassan Piker so they could get pictures with Hassan Piker, because they're not a real group. They're an influencer brand. Right. And what they were there to do, they weren't there to preach anti-imperialism and challenge the phonies who ran it and build a real organization. They were there to beg for a place in leftism. And that's what they did. They went to the event and they stood in the back going, please, call on me. Please call on me. I want to be seen with Hassan Piker. Can I get seen with Hassan Piker? They're begging for a place in leftism. They want to be part of leftism. We don't want to be part of leftism. We want to go lower and deeper to the real masses. Lower and deeper to the real masses. Begging for a place in leftism is pathetic, right? They want to be AOC's poodle. They want to be Hassan Piker and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's poodle. We went there with a book about who the Houthis are, and we left it there, and we were escorted out by PSL thugs. And then we left that book at a local mosque, at a number of local mosques, and we left that book at a number of hotels where delegates were staying, and we visited local Shia Muslim community members there that are anti-imperialist and sympathetic with the Islamic Revolution of Iran, and then we drove back to New York, right? We got shit to do. We're in the streets for Ibrahim Traore. We're in the streets for opposing war with Russia. We're in the streets when Putin met with Trump. We were in the streets promoting it. We're doing the real work. We're doing the real work. We're doing it. We're the real deal, right? You read our book on the Houthis, we're the real deal, right? You look at the work that we did. Look at the end of the year video that CPI did. We're the real deal. There's a lot of frauds out there. There's a lot of phonies out there. There's a lot of insincere people out there. We're the real deal. And don't you doubt it. And that presentation I just gave you about Rome, that lays out and explains to you the situation that we're in. We are from the tradition of Rosa Luxemburg. We're also from the tradition of Malcolm X. We're from the tradition of Ho Chi Minh. We're from the tradition of Khomeini. We're from the tradition of Ibrahim Traore. We're from the tradition of Daniel Ortega. We're from the tradition of all the anti-colonial fighters. We're also from the tradition of Abraham Lincoln. We're also from the tradition of Franklin Roosevelt. We incarnate anti-imperialism and anti-revisionism when it really gets down to it. anti-revisionism, right? Revisionism is an attempt to fit socialism into the Western imperialist system. That's what revisionism has always been, from the time of Edward Bernstein to the time of Kautsky to the time of Khrushchev. People who try to take socialist thought and fit it into imperialism, that's what revisionism is. It's not straying from Marx, right? You know, Lenin strayed from Marx, Stalin strayed from Marx, Deng Xiaoping strayed from Marx. Revisionism is an attempt to create a socialism that is compatible with imperialism. We are anti-revisionists. And my new book, that should be available pretty soon, will go into great detail about the struggle against revisionism, particularly within American communism, and what it really stood for, the geopolitics, the civilizations of the sea versus the civilizations of the land, thalassocracy versus the people of the land fighting back. We incarnate anti-revisionism. We are the anti-revisionists. We are the Lincolnists, right? We are what the Trade Union Unity League and the sharecroppers unions of the 1930s were. We are what the struggle to oppose the Vietnam War was all about. We are anti-revisionism. The innovationist movement that celebrates human creativity, that seeks to build a movement that empowers and unleashes people and pushes them forward to do great things. That's what we are. Folks, there is a thinking stuff from which all that exists comes. All that exists is within the same substance, the same thinking stuff. And that same thinking stuff that all that exists seeks to express itself. And we all must struggle to find a way to let that thinking stuff express itself through us, express itself through our actions, through our work. Let the thinking stuff from which all things are made, let God express himself. Let the light of God and the light of righteousness spread from within us. Let us be a vessel for this light to come into the world. Let the thinking stuff, the creative stuff from which all things are made, let it express itself through you. Be a vessel through which the light of God and the light of righteousness can extend itself into the universe and lead us all to a higher plane toward the mode of existence, the ideal way of being that was the original plan all along. Right? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world, but a city on a hill cannot be hidden. So let your light shine." I am here to tell you that innovationism is a movement that understands what that light is and wants to help you find the light within yourself and let that light shine before the world. We understand the source of human creative power. We understand the problems of the world we're in, and that everywhere in this world is trying to stomp that light out of you. And we are saying, let that light shine. Let the light shine. Let the light shine before man. That's what we're here to say.